And we're live. All right, Roy Boy Standard coming at you. I'm Will Roy, and with me as always, my little brother, Chris, who's getting littler by the day.
Good one.
And quarantine's taking its toll on you.
I am going legit. I'm not as light as I thought I would be. I mean, I'm like 188 right now, which is pretty much what I was when this whole thing started. But I told Sarah this morning, when this is over, I'm going to start the mass gain of all mass gains. Like, I'm going like full blown mass gain mindset. I haven't done that in a little while, but see if I can break my all-time record. Heaviest I've ever been at 208.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't eat enough food to do any kind of mass gains anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't like to make excuses, but it's not like food is it's not like an easy commodity right now. So I'm not going to try to be eating like 4,500 calories a day. I mean,
It's a little expensive.
yeah, the time to train is there right now, but unfortunately the resources outside of that aren't.
So today's episode, coming at you a little different today. I'm going to be the interviewer, and I'm going to be interviewing my brother, and we're going to switch it up, and we're going to learn a little bit about different training modalities, and basically just pick Chris's brain on how he would train certain individuals. And, you know, most of the time somebody will fall into one of these categories, so you can kind of pick and choose what category you would fall into and learn a little bit about it. And why Chris thinks you should train this way over possibly what some other trainers or coaches might have you be training. So,
Real quick though, before we get started, did you think of any other movies?
oh, from our last podcast,
Yeah.
for those that didn't watch it, we listed our top 10 and most likely forgot about some.
Well, even if you didn't remember it, but I mean, did you see that I posted that poll on my Instagram of who had a better list?
Oh, yeah.
Did you see the final results?
No.
I smoked you. It was like 19-3 or something like that. Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, your list was, X2, Lion King. Like, you come out the gate with those two first. That's just, you're just all down.
Yeah, switch it up, man. I mean, I could have done a top 10 of just straight Marvel because I love Marvel movies. I was trying to, throw a little different genres in there for people.
Yeah. Well, I just figured I'd bring that to your attention. I figured that was.
I feel like I did. I feel like I did think of a movie, but I'm not.
I actually didn't. I tried to, but I actually didn't think of it.
But
all right, let's do this.
Ready to dive into this? All right, we're kicking old school. We'll go back to the very beginning on how both of us started and how probably 90% of people start their fitness journey, and that is the good old bodybuilder. And so I want to be a bodybuilder, and for the sake of this show, because this is how we roll, I'm going to be a natural bodybuilder. But I like body part splits. There's a lot of people that still do body part splits. And what happens with a body part split is most people become imbalanced because they're crushing chest, they're crushing shoulders, and they're hitting back all once a week usually. So if you are training me, I want to keep my body part split, but I want to avoid those common injuries that you see with bodybuilders. How would you program for me in that regard?
Okay, well, first off, so when we were gonna
hold on one sec. Also, bodybuilder is obviously it's about look. So I care more about look than being strong. So obviously muscle mass and aesthetics are what I'm out for. Not necessarily.
So basically, when you told me that this is what we were like, this idea for the show, like, hey, I got excited because this is fun. This is like, I love talking about this stuff. This is all training. This is my thing. But so before we really dive in, I just want to preface this as like, when it comes to like all these different scenarios we're going to be dealing with here, like it's very general because obviously like there is a sense when you're a coach or a trainer and you're training somebody for something in particular, there's always going to be a sense of individualization. So basically we'll start with like a bird's eye view of basically how I would approach this thing. And then if you want to come at me with maybe some more finer details or things like that, and then just do the back and forth of us going.
For the sake of keeping this uniform and because you somewhat, I mean, you know my injury, you know everything. So for the sake of this, I am the person. So I want to be a bodybuilder. So how are you going to approach this with me?
Okay. Well, first off, we're not going to do body part split. um, so especially when it comes to being a natural lifter, like if you're not, taking performance enhancing drugs, you're not taking hormones, you're not taking all that other stuff. The body part split, outside of being a newbie trainee, a person that's never lifted before, like when you've never lifted before, you can get away with a body part split just because you can kind of throw anything at the wall and some of it's going to stick and just about anything's going to work. But when you have any kind of training experience and you're going to be a natural lifter, the body part split's got to go out the window. Because when it comes to basically what we're looking for with this bodybuilder look, and you're going to be drug free, you need to stimulate the muscles and the fibers enough to grow them, but you can't annihilate them to the point where it's going to take you an extended time to recover. You don't want to beat a dead horse when it comes to this stuff. So, we have to look at what's the ultimate goal of a bodybuilder. So, bodybuilder, it's all about size and symmetry of the physique of the muscles, so like the definition, all that stuff. And obviously, especially with bodybuilding, more than just about any other, like the nutrition side of things is going to be a big part. But I won't.
Yeah, well, we'll say that for another day. Maybe that'd be one.
But as far as like seeing, all that stuff, the nutrition is going to play a big role. But when it comes to the training, we want to, like I said, we want to stimulate. We don't want to annihilate. So we're not going to do body part split. We're not going to go into the gym on a Monday and hit nothing but the pecs. Like it's not going to work. And you can't anyways. You're not going to do a bench press and only hit your pecs. You're going to be hitting your tris. You're going to be hitting your shoulders. So I would it's going to be a 6 days a week, 6 day a week training split. It's just going to be push, pull, legs, push, pull, legs. And then the 7th day off, and then we'll just repeat that. But the way that I would do that, so obviously push day being all your push exercises. We got, your chest, the pecs, the shoulders, triceps, all that stuff. The pull days being your back, your buys, and all that stuff. And then your legs. We all know what the hell our legs are. But the way I would stagger this split. So I wrote like these notes down here. So like, we would emphasize. So if we're doing a 6 day a week split, push pull legs times 2. So you're doing that twice. The first push day, we could emphasize chest, first out the gate. And on that second push day, we could maybe emphasize the shoulders a little bit more. But ultimately, we're still hitting all of those push muscles twice a week. All right. So frequency for a drug-free lifter is going to be super important because it's the training aspect that's going to signal the muscle protein synthesis and all those things that's going to signal the body to start growing. Guys on steroids, there's steroids and stuff. That does that for them. That keeps them in that anabolic state. They can be in that muscle protein synthesis 24 hours a day because they're taking these drugs. For a drug-free lifter, it's your actual training session that puts you in that state. So we need higher frequency of training. So when the frequency goes up, other things need to kind of, fall into line from there. So that's why we're not going to do one body part a week, because if we hit, chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, and doing these things, then we're going a long time until those pecs are starting to get some love again, or we're going a long time until our back's starting to get some love again. So we want to send that signaling as frequently as possible. So that's why we're going push, pull, legs, and then we can just alter maybe the emphasis on each of those, especially if you have weaker points that you want to, you know, focus your energy on. If your chest grows really easy, maybe we emphasize the shoulders a little bit more on your push workout, stuff like that. So that's a big approach that I would take. That's probably a little bit different. I would also, a big problem when it comes to a lot of people in their bodybuilding routines or training regimens, however you want to, you know, describe it, is they waste their time on a lot of dinky exercises, and they focus on action, not necessarily focus on function. And what I mean by both those things, dinky exercises, like I would not spend a lot, like you see guys come out the gate and they're going to start their workout with like flies or something, like if they're working their chest, or they're going to start with like some pec flies, or, you know, cable flies, stuff like that. Like that's peanuts, man. Especially for a natural lifter, you need to focus on the main pathways of hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is basically putting size on. And Brad Schoenfeld he's like the leading expert on this stuff, which I never really got because the dude's not very big at all. But the big pathways for putting muscle on, you have muscular tension, muscular damage, and metabolic stress. And everybody always wants to go after metabolic stress. That's the pump. That's like your light weights for higher reps and getting the pump, because who doesn't like a good pump? You know, pump is awesome.
It's the show. Look at the show.
Yeah. So everybody likes a good pump, and, you know, myself included, but they get carried away with it, man. Like, yeah, it's easy to get a nice, easy, awesome pump with, you know, cable flies, because you can stare at yourself in the mirror while you're freaking ripping these things out and you get some blood flowing and feel great. But, you know, half hour later, you shrink back down to your normal size and you really have accomplished nothing. So don't focus on dinky exercises. Focus on your big exercises, big compound lifts that are going to produce muscular tension, which is the first pathway to muscle growth. You need tension on the muscle. It's the reason why I can't just do 1,000 bicep curls with a 5-pound dumbbell. 5-pound dumbbell is not heavy enough to elicit tension in my bicep to fatigue those muscles, to force them to adapt and grow. Muscular tension is the first one, and it's the biggest one, but it's also the most overlooked one, because it takes hard work to move heavy weight. You know, as the great Ronnie Coleman said, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift heavy ass weight. And, you know, I mean, the dude can't walk anymore, but he was the greatest bodybuilder of all time.
He took it to a different level, which mad props to him, but he fucked himself up for the rest of his life. So
yeah, I mean, he's in rough shape, but that's just the thing though, man. Like it's the hardest work, but it's also going to give you the biggest results. So don't focus on dinky exercises. Focus on your big compound lifts where you can get some good weight on there, muscular tension. Like, don't just work in the 10 to 15 rep range. Don't be afraid to work in those 3 to 5 rep ranges. But then I would also, emphasize the loading schemes. So this might be a little difficult to explain.
I was gonna say, let's try to keep it somewhat cookie cutter here. Like you could go a little too deep sometimes.
Well, this is important though. When you're talking about bodybuilding and you're talking about, you need to develop the muscle in the entire spectrum. So every muscle has a strength curve. Like, so for example, like if I'm doing a bench press, I can handle a lot more weight in the top 4 inches of the bench press than I can the first 4 inches off of my chest. So if you want to fully develop a muscle, you need to fully develop the strength curve or the tension curve, whatever you want to call it. It's the same reason why, like I've made posts about this with arms. It's really easy to understand with arms. Like if I'm just doing a standing bicep curl, that's going to emphasize the mid-range of the bicep curl, because when my arm's flexed at 90 degrees when I'm standing upright, that's where the most tension is placed on the muscle. Whereas if I do a preacher curl and I'm leaning forward, now it's going to be more emphasized when my arm is closest to me, and it's that peak contraction that's being emphasized as opposed to the mid-range. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You need to develop the entire range of the muscle. So that's why if I'm trying to develop my biceps, I need to do standing bicep curls to develop the mid-range. I need to do preacher curls to get that end range, that peak contraction when my hand's closest to my body. And I need to do incline curls when my arm is laid behind me. And that's going to emphasize that very end range motion when my arm is stretched out, and that first half of the range of motion that's going to be emphasized. So you can take that approach through all your body parts as well, which is why I like the push-pull legs, because if I'm hitting my chest twice a week, I can emphasize maybe the top range of motion in one workout and the bottom range of motion in another workout. I can do that with my shoulder work, my shoulder stuff. Like, you can do these things and emphasize not only different body parts in each push or pull workout, but you can also start to emphasize different lines of tension and over focusing on certain aspects of the range of motion of a particular muscle group, if that
makes it, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, so I like the push-pull legs. And then it makes a lot of sense when you're saying you got to emphasize different ranges to hit the muscle in different ways, instead of, because I think a lot of people would think push-pull legs. They'd go, oh, well, I'm doing bench press on Monday and I'm doing bench press again on Friday. They wouldn't necessarily think, oh, maybe I'm going to do partial rep ranges on my bench press my second go round.
Like, perfect example would be like, if I'm doing push-pull legs, that means I'm going to do my push workout on Monday, and my second push workout is going to be on Thursday. So maybe my Monday push workout, I'll start with bench press, and I'm going to do barbell bench. So that's going to be my heavy set of bench. So I'm going to hit these pecs. I'm going to get that muscular tension on the pecs and the chest. So that's going to be my heavier weight. And maybe I'll do some bench pressing, sets, 5x5 or whatever you want to choose, but keeping it somewhat heavier. That bench coming down, hitting your chest, using the barbell. So I'm hitting my heavier weights. It's a little, I don't want to say it's a short range of motion, but it's more of a compound lift. But then come Thursday, maybe I start that workout maybe with some barbell shoulder press to give that to the shoulders. And then maybe my second exercise, I'll follow up with like a flat dumbbell bench press, where now I can work in a little bit higher of a rep range. So now I'm going for a little bit more maybe muscle damage and metabolic stress on the pecs, as opposed to Monday where I was just really focusing on that muscular tension. But now I'm using dumbbells, so it's a different implement, but I can get a lot deeper stretch in the bottom because I'm not restricted by the range of motion of that bar. So now I'm emphasizing more that far back position of the bench press, as opposed to, maybe that mid range that I was hitting with that bar. So you can just do all sorts of these sorts of things with each body part, emphasizing not only different rep ranges in each workout, but different lines of tension, different, overemphasizing different parts of the strength curves, all that stuff. That's what's going to play into developing not only, a symmetrical body, but also a healthy one. I touched on a big problem, and this is why a lot of guys come into injury when it comes to bodybuilding, is they just focus on the action of the muscle and not necessarily the function of the muscle. And the easiest body part that I could probably explain this would be like your glute medius. So like, you see a lot of girls, they'll do like the hip abduction machines, just cranking that glute med. And for those of you who don't know, your glute med is like the outside of your hip. It's like that top part of your butt, all the ladies want that bubble butt, and they'll hook the cable to the leg and do the Jane Fonda, abducting their leg and all that stuff. And that's the action of the muscle. Like, if you look at the action of the glute med, it's to abduct your leg. Yeah, it opens the leg up. But the function, it works as a stabilizer for the hip. It helps internally and externally control that hip through rotation and all those things like that. So if I want to work the function of the glute med, then I need to maybe do some like single leg RDLs, like force that glute med to stabilize my hip joint through a range of motion, as opposed to just constantly abducting my leg going through thousands of reps of a Jane Fonda exercise.
Which you pointed this out on me. This was a problem with me. My I could not stabilize on, was my left leg. I think it was my left.
So that's just the thing. Like when you can't stabilize a joint through a range of motion, then you won't have that range of motion. You won't be able to use it. Like, you see a lot of power lifters or even bodybuilders. I mean, you see a lot of guys in a typical gym where Like they'll want to do back squats, but they can't do a back squat with just the bar. Like they have to have 135 on the bar in order just to get down into the squat, because they need that weight to push them down, because they don't have the stability to freely go down into that range of motion. And then, they wonder why every third or fourth leg workout, their lower back snaps on them, and then like they just get nagged with low back pain. It's because the function's not there. You constantly focus on these muscle actions just to try and put them through a range of motion to try and make them bigger, but you don't necessarily focus the function. And you can't train if you're hurt. So that's a big thing that you need to account for.
Yeah, I think a lot of bodybuilders or even bodybuilder type training guys that train that way, they forget that like Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman, like Kai Green, like your top bodybuilder, those guys can do the splits. They can put their arms behind their back. Like they are extremely flexible, and they put time and work into those things. And those dudes that come into the gym thinking that they're trying to be like that, they ain't putting any time into stretching. They ain't putting any time into like overall body health.
Yeah.
Real quick, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I want to get to the next one. Cardio. How am I doing cardio?
That's what I was just going to finish up with. Real quick, though, I just want to touch on this. Because the frequency's higher, we're training 6 days a week. 45 minutes is max. That's as long as the session is going to take. Like if we're training 6 days a week, you can't be going an hour and a half each time. So I just wanted to touch on that. 45 minutes is the absolute max. If you're going to go longer than that, scrap it, go get some food, wait a couple hours, and then you can come back and finish up with another 20, 30-minute session or something. But so I just wanted to throw that in there. So cardio. So I just wrote some general notes on this. Obviously with bodybuilding, cardio is a big thing. I would say morning walks in a fasted state is a staple, no matter what time of year it is. Just because, like I said, we want to emphasize health first, but also easy way to, stay lean. Easy way to, kind of just keep that fat furnace kind of going a little bit. I'll no matter any of these scenarios we talk about today, morning walks is a staple. Just because I always emphasize health first. But you don't really see bodybuilders do a lot of high intensity stuff. But I have no problem throwing that in early in an off season, or maybe even early in a camp. And, so typical bodybuilder, if you're actually, going on stage for a show.
Typical bodybuilding type cardio is walking on a treadmill for 45 minutes at an incline.
Yeah, that's my morning walk. Like I'm cool with that being your morning walk session. And then if you want to throw in, some, as the show gets closer and calories are going to be at a scarcity, then I'm cool keeping it lower intensity. But like I said, earlier in the off season, when calories are adequate and all that stuff, like let's throw in some high intensity stuff. A big thing, everyone wants to know what's better, the slow and steady or the high intensity interval. Because the slow and steady, they think once that heart rate gets up, then you start to burn more glycogen and carbs as opposed to fat, which it's not necessarily true. It's the total, like you got to look at the total volume. So if I'm just walking, if it's slow and steady, yes, a higher percentage of the energy I'm using is coming from fat, but the total volume of fat that's actually burned is not necessarily higher. So if I do, 60-minute slow and steady, say I burn, 90% of my energy is coming from fat burn, whereas opposed to a 20 to 30-minute high intensity session, maybe 70-80% of my energy is being burned from carbs or glycogen. But the total volume of energy burned, because fat is still being burned in high intensity stuff, it's just a higher percentage of that burn is coming from glycogen and carbohydrates. But the total volume of fat burned, not only during but afterwards of a high intensity, is going to be much higher than it is on a slow and steady. So we don't want to completely shy away from that stuff. So while calories are adequate early in the off season or early in a camp, let's throw in some high intensity stuff 2 to 3 days a week in conjunction with daily morning walks.
Got it. All right. So that's bodybuilder. Let's move on. See, I told you were going to take longer than 10 minutes on each of these.
Dude,
But anyway, So,
I'll keep it.
yeah. So the next one,
Maybe we got a 2-part show here. Who knows?
everybody's favorite, my personal favorite probably, it's CrossFit, man. The controversial CrossFit. I want to be a CrossFit athlete. So those who are not familiar with CrossFit is,
Who's not familiar with CrossFit?
well, I don't know. Some people, I mean, if you're watching our show, you're probably familiar with most fitness stuff, and CrossFit being one of them. But in CrossFit, it's about the well-balanced athlete. So not only do you have to be strong as hell, but you have to be able to run 10 miles, 15 miles if you need to, swim, bike, carry. You know, it's basically the all-around athlete. So I want to be a CrossFit athlete. How do you balance? First, you got to get me strong, but yet I still have to be conditioned and I still have to run. Those things it's a fine line. So how are you approaching that kind of training?
So first off, when it comes to CrossFit, what people need to realize is CrossFit is a sport. A lot of people don't realize that because CrossFit is a competition using, weights and barbells and kettlebells and stuff like that. People look at it as just a form of working out, which yes, it is. It's a form of exercise. It's a form of working out, just like basketball. You can do pickup basketball 3 times a week as a form of exercise, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, that's all you're going to do is just play basketball. So that's the big thing is like people watch the CrossFit games, they see these things on TV and they see these events and these workouts during the games and they think that that's how they need to train every day forever. Like it doesn't work that way. So the biggest mistake I see with CrossFit people is they don't periodize their training. Like what's going to separate the men from the boys in CrossFit is strength. Like the high level CrossFit dudes and women are strong as hell. Like they're super strong. Like they're snatching crazy weights. Like that's insane strength. But not only being strong, but you have to be strong in relation to your body weight. And that's a big thing. Like you can't, that's why a power lifter isn't going to go into a CrossFit event and tear it up. Yeah, he might be super strong, but in relation to his body weight, he's actually not that strong. If you're 200 pounds and you can sit there and deadlift over 600 and, snatch 275, 315 and all this stuff, like you are super strong because you still have to be able to do tons of pull-ups, push-ups, burpees, rope climbs, handstand walks, like this stuff that is very body weight dependent. So that's why you can't just get super strong and super big. So you have to keep that in mind. So the biggest thing is, we're going to periodize your training. So we're going to focus. The first thing we need to look at is technique and movement quality because there's a lot of Olympic lifting in CrossFit. There's a lot of just lifting in general, deadlifting, overhead squatting, snatching, all that stuff. Lots of overhead work, kipping pull-ups. People don't look at kipping pull-ups and toes to bar as being an overhead movement, but it is. Like that arm is overhead and you have to, express strength in those end ranges of motion. So we have to look at technique and movement quality. Like without those things, you're just going to get hurt. So you have to make sure that we have full ranges of motion, full, use of those ranges of motion and control through those ranges of motion. And then technique, make sure, you're going to have Olympic lifting and all that stuff. So that's base level stuff that needs to happen before you really start to dive in. Once that stuff's taken care of, then we need to periodize the training. Strength is main focus first. The only reason being, it's going to take me, like if you're sitting at a 315 deadlift, it's going to take a lot longer for you to get from a 315 deadlift or, a 200 pound snatch. If you're starting at a 200 pound snatch, it's going to take a lot longer to get you from there to, 600 plus deadlift or a 315 snatch than it is for me to just get you aerobically in shape for a competition. It's going to take way longer. Like conditioning wise, like you can get in shape, 6-8 weeks, top like 10 tops. Like we can get you in pretty damn good shape to perform, like as far as like metabolically speaking. But it's going to take a lot longer to get strong and get strong enough to really make some noise in any kind of competition.
A good thing to point out is people like if we look at Matt Fraser, who is the champ, 4-time games champ, he was an Olympic lifter before he got into CrossFit. For years, that's what he did. He was actually going to the Olympics to be an Olympic lifter. So his strength was already there through probably 10 plus years of Olympic lifting. So really all he had to do was get that conditioning, body weight type stuff down. And that is something that I think, like, I might be getting a little ahead that you're going to touch on this, but like people see the games and they do deadlifts and then they go right into conditioning workout.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't, people watch the games and then they think that's how they have to work out every day. Like, you can't ride two horses with one ass. It's a famous quote that Charles Poliquin used to always say. Like, when you like, people loved when CrossFit first hit the scene, all these people started doing it and they made crazy gains. Like, because like I said, when you're a newbie trainer, you can literally do anything and you're going to get better. But this is basically how I really made a name for myself kind of as a strength conditioning coach. Is like, I took over the programming for CrossFit Gym, and it was the typical, you come in, you look at the board, like there's a warm up, there's a strength portion, and then there's a metcon, and it's the same thing every day. It's a strength, 5x5 or, whatever it is. And then there's a 15 or 20-minute AMRAP after that, metabolic conditioning. And yeah, when you're a newbie, that's great because you're getting a little bit of everything. Everything's going to get better because you've never done anything before. But after a while, like these people that have been doing it for a year or two, they're like, man, I've just been stuck. I can't get, my deadlift won't get up. My back squat won't get up. Yeah, because we need to start actually paying attention to certain things now. It's like the knobs on like a stereo or everything like that. Like, we need to maybe turn the bass up on one and the treble comes down on another one. We need to emphasize something a little bit for, a 6-week block. And that's what I did. I came out with a strength program or a mass gain program for a CrossFit gym, and everybody hopped on it. And what do you know, after 6 weeks of really focusing nothing but strength work, everybody got stronger. And we still kept one conditioning day in a week, and the conditioning really didn't go anywhere. We just maintained what we had there so we could emphasize and improve something we had somewhere else. I mean, it's like programming 101. So that's a big thing for sure. The other thing that I was going to talk about was you will get more carryover from the strength work as opposed to, because like like there's tons of WODs. Like, what's the one where it's like 30 clean and press for time? Like, what's that one called?
Is that
Is that
Mary?
Grace?
Huh?
Is that Grace?
Might be Grace. Yeah, that sounds right.
So yeah, it's like 30 clean and press at 135 for time. So like, yeah, like your heart rate's going to be crazy elevated after that. Like, you're going to be out of breath and stuff. So people are going to kind of look at that as like a conditioning workout. But if your max clean and press is 185 and you have to do 30 at 135, like, that's going to be really hard. But if we take 6 to 8 weeks to focus on getting stronger, and I took your max clean and press from 185 to 275, like now, instead of that, 135 being like 75%, 80% of your 1 rep max that you have to do for 30 reps now it's 50% of your 1 rep max. So it's gonna be a lot easier and a lot more manageable to crank that workout out without doing any sort of conditioning work. Like, we just got stronger. It's a lesser percent of your 1 rep max. So it's going to take less effort per rep to complete. Thus, you're going to perform better. Like, so you can look at that.
Athletes knock that out in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. And the guys that are going to knock that out in 2 minutes, it's not the guys that are super good aerobic shape. It's going to be the guys that are super strong. Like, it's the same reason, like, you see the big linemen in the combine repping 225 out, for more reps than the freaking corners, because their bench press is just higher. They're not in better shape. Like, it's just a lesser percent of their 1 rep max, so they can just pump it out more. So that's a big thing, like, especially with those CrossFit workouts, because that's the nature of most of the workouts. I mean, you have the workouts where you got to run a 5K or they have to run a mile and all this stuff, and you still want to keep, an aerobic base in there, and you're going to have to do some conditioning work and endurance efforts that are like over 90 minutes, but not all the time. You have to take periods of time where you focus on certain things, and strength and power, those got to be number one, because they're going to give you the most bang for your buck.
So wrapping up the CrossFit, how long of a strength program are you putting a CrossFit athlete on before?
I mean, it would depend on where they're at and the nature of maybe their event. I mean, typically, if we're talking about a decent level athlete that's got some training experience and they're decently strong, I mean, I would say maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And it's not like for these 6 to 8 weeks we're focusing on nothing but strength. If we're going to train 3 to 4 times a week, maybe two or three of those guys are really maybe just dedicated towards strength, and then we're still doing another workout where we're focusing on nothing but maybe some power endurance. Maybe we're doing some intervals on the rower, or maybe some metabolic conditioning type of workouts like a chipper or something, where they're getting these full body movements in with cleans and burpees and shit like that. So it's not like when I say a strength program, we're doing nothing but strength. It's the emphasis. It's getting the majority of our attention. So it's conjugate, man. It's the conjugate system. It means you're training multiple energy systems and multiple, physical, what's the word I'm looking for? Physical attributes, but you're focusing on it. You're not exclusively training them. That's linear periodization. That's basically been debunked as being less superior than the conjugate system. So
Cool. All right. So that's CrossFit.